Now, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call out Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and their disastrous maganomics. Last week, Donald Trump and his cabinet of billionaires recklessly imposed the largest tariff tax hike in American history. Now, look at the markets just today. They are crashing. Costs will now increase on all kinds of costs, goods for the American family and people across this country. Working families can't afford to pay more for basic needs, for necessities. No one voted to pay for more expensive groceries, homes, cars, and household goods. But that's all Donald Trump has to offer. We know the supply chains and small businesses are also right now being thrown into chaos, and hardworking people are going to lose their jobs. So not only do we have this incredibly large tariff tax hike, we know that the stock market is in a free fall. Retirement accounts are being wiped out. We've lost trillions of dollars in the stock market in just a few weeks. Maganomics hurts working people and gives huge tax breaks and giveaways to billionaires, to Elon Musk, and all of their billionaire friends. And now Maganomics is about more than just causing a recession. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and House Republicans are fighting to take away billions of dollars from Medicaid, which will threaten, we know, care for millions of people. That means higher healthcare costs, with many losing coverage completely. And Maganomics is slashing employees and programs from the federal government. It's about destroying the social safety net and the programs which we rely on. Medical research, the Department of Education, air safety, and so much more. They are attacking the foundations of our economy and the foundations of our lives and our families. Now, Republicans in Congress need to join us and say enough is enough. End the chaos, end the incompetence, and put American families first. Let's stop and reject Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and let's reject Maganomics right now.
Gentleman from Kentucky reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank first the entire Minnesota delegation, in particular Congresswoman Morrison, for introducing this important resolution. This is obviously a very sad time across our country, and of course our hearts, our prayers go to the family and everyone impacted across the state. Now, I know that the events of June 14th were shocking and heartbreaking. Minnesota State House Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark Hortman, were assassinated. Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, were critically injured. And I offer my love, I know, on behalf of this Congress and those across the country who have been impacted by these crimes, who have seen these crimes, and who all reject this political violence. I want to take this time to thank the tireless work by state, federal, and local law enforcement to bring the perpetrator to justice. And we should be clear. Political violence against anyone is an attack on our democracy and all of us. Now, we know that the shooter committed this terrible crime to terrorize and intimidate. And he intended to spread his hate and violence toward many more public servants. Now, the gunman had documents listing dozens of additional lawmakers targeted for assassination or for violence, including Congressman Krishnamurthy, who of course is a member of our Oversight Committee. We've seen how members of Congress are facing more and more threats, but we cannot stand and we will not be silent. It is important that we continue to push back against hate, fear, division, and misinformation in a bipartisan way. Every elected official at every level must loudly call out and denounce these attacks, because acts of political violence like these are a fundamental threat to our democracy. Today, we will come together in a bipartisan way to condemn these senseless attacks and to reject political violence. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to demand that Donald Trump and our Attorney General come clean to the American people and release the Epstein files. Now, this weekend, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "Let's not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about." Well, Mr. President, a lot of people actually care. And we know that MAGA was all in on Jeffrey Epstein. Now, my Republican colleagues have sent letters, they've posted, they've demanded disclosure. Donald Trump Jr., the president's own son, has tweeted dozens of times about this case. FBI Director Kash Patel swore under oath in front of the Senate that he would be transparent with the American public and release the Epstein files. He said, and I want to quote, "Make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened," that he would do that. That was his quote. Now, in February, our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, told Fox News that Epstein's client list was, again, and I quote, "sitting on my desk right now to review," end quote. Now, they claim there was never a list. And this weekend, Donald Trump claimed that the files were written by Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the Biden administration. These are bizarre reversals. And it's obvious to the American public. Someone is lying, and someone is trying to hide something. So let's look at the facts. We know Elon Musk said publicly on June 5th that Donald Trump is mentioned in the Epstein files. We know that Epstein died in a federal prison overseen by Donald Trump's Department of Justice. We know that Jeffrey Epstein in 2008 was given a generous non-prosecution agreement for sex trafficking charges. Now, that agreement let him continue his criminal activities, and that agreement was offered by Alexandra Acosta, who was Donald Trump's chosen Secretary of Labor. That's not all. We know that Donald Trump and Epstein had a long-standing personal relationship. Epstein told one writer, and I quote, "I was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years," end quote. Donald Trump told New York Magazine in 2002, and I want to quote this. Quote, this is Donald Trump. "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do. And many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life," unquote. That's disgusting, wrong, and we must inquire more information. The truth is we don't know what the facts are in this case. Now, I can't explain why the Trump administration have changed their minds on Epstein, but their behavior raises questions. This is the time that we must demand answers, and the Oversight Committee is going to do just that. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
Gentleman reserves. Now recognize the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, today we are considering the first of 4 bills which represent a serious violation of the rights of Washington, D.C. and the democratic process. Now, we know that D.C. has more residents than 2 states. D.C. taxpayers pay federal taxes more per capita than any state, and D.C. as a whole contributes more federal taxes than 12 states. There are over 700,000 active residents here who deserve a voice. Now, D.C.'s government is accountable to the people who live here, and local leaders should and are empowered to solve local problems without Congress interfering. Now, I've said this many times. If Donald Trump wants to run D.C., he should resign as president and run for mayor. And if my colleagues here want to legislate for D.C., there are plenty of opportunities to run for the D.C. City Council. Now, I was the mayor of my city for 8 years before I came to Congress, and I love local government. A lot can get done and accomplished. But let's not sit here in Congress and pretend to be a super city council imposing our pet policies on residents who reject this agenda. Now, the bill before us right now is called the D.C. Crimes Act, or the so-called D.C. Crimes Act. This bill will impose longer sentences on young people who commit crimes. But how does it do this? It eliminates the ability of judges to make the best sentencing decisions for young adults. It will lead to worse outcomes, more reoffenders, and less safety. Now, let's be clear. This bill is not about making anyone safer or D.C. safer. It's about stripping decision-making away from the people and the judges of D.C. And instead, handing the power of judges over to politicians in this room who don't live here, who don't vote here, and certainly don't answer to D.C. residents. This bill amends D.C.'s Youth Rehabilitation Act, or the YRA as it's known. Now, the YRA is not radical. It has been in place since 1985, and it actually mirrors laws in states like Florida and Michigan. Its purpose is simple: to give judges discretion in sentencing young adults. Now, judges can punish some young people when appropriate in ways that reduce their risk of reoffending. But this bill would rip away discretion. It eliminates a judge's ability to waive mandatory minimums, even when the facts show a one-size-fits-all sentence makes no sense. Judges, not politicians, should decide sentences. Now, individuals whose convictions are set aside under the YRA are less likely to reoffend. That means the law works and it keeps communities safer. Now, we also know that in nearly 80% of cases, judges impose a mandatory minimum sentence anyway. These waivers are rarely granted and only when a judge determines it is appropriate. This bill is an undemocratic attack on D.C., its residents, and is also just bad policy. Now, Republicans in the majority claim D.C.'s policies are too soft. But we know that the sponsor of this bill is also from Florida, which has allowed judges to waive mandatory minimums for decades. Florida even caps youth offender sentences at 6 years, something D.C., by the way, has never done. Let's be clear, and we can all agree, that violent crime has no place in our communities. People are rightly concerned about crime in D.C. and back home in their communities, and Democrats, of course, want safe streets. But we believe in investing in solutions that actually make people safer, not political stunts or short-term gimmicks or cheap, tough talk. And we know what works: supporting local police departments, investing in community-based partnerships, and creating economic opportunity to drive down shootings, homicides, and burglaries. Now, getting guns out of the hands of violent criminals keeps us all safer. But instead of doing that work, Republicans are wasting time attacking the district while ignoring the crisis in their own backyards. Now, former President Trump is doing nothing to address violent crime in states with some of the highest crime rates in the country. In fact, his administration has made things worse. Trump has opposed efforts to expand criminal background checks. He has blocked attempts to reduce ghost guns and machine gun conversion devices. His Department of Justice has gutted the number of inspectors who stop businesses from selling guns to criminals, cutting that workforce down by 2/3. And on top of that, Trump illegally froze or canceled $3.8 billion in DOJ grant programs, including COPS grants for our police departments that, of course, help communities hire and train police officers. I urge my colleagues to reject this misguided power grab. With that, I reserve my time.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself time as I consume.
So recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we're back with a second bill to undermine Washington, D.C. with an undemocratic and misguided policy. Now, Republicans in Congress are once more acting again as a city council for D.C., overriding the choices of local residents and their elected officials while ignoring the real issues the rest of the country faces. Now, nearly 700,000 tax-paying Americans in D.C. deserve the same right to self-governance as every other community, including control over criminal laws. Now, Democrats on the Oversight Committee strongly oppose this bill, which would allow children as young as 14 years old to be charged as adults. Now, let's be clear. This bill is not about safety. It's about stripping away jurisdiction and sending more children into the adult prison system. Now, this bill lowers the age at which children can be tried as adults in D.C. from 16 to 14 years old for certain crimes. If you commit a crime, you should be held accountable, and we all can agree on this. But a 14-year-old is not an adult. They are a middle schooler. Their brains are still developing. Treating them as adults is shameful. We can all agree that children should be treated differently by our courts. That matters when it comes to accountability and rehabilitation. And here's what the research shows. Youth charged as adults are more likely to reoffend than youth that go through the juvenile courts. And that's not speculation, it's what decades of data show. Now, the CDC reviewed the evidence and found that sending kids to adult prisons increases violence, does not reduce it. And the National Research Council concluded that keeping punishment in line with age is the best way to prevent future offending. Now, every shred of research says the same thing. Putting kids in adult prison makes us less safe, not more safe. House Democrats know that violent crime, of course, has no place in our communities. And people are right to be concerned about crime. And Democrats are taking it seriously. So if the goal is safer communities, this bill moves us in the wrong direction. Let's also talk about who this bill impacts. More than 93% of youth arrests in D.C. in the first half of this year were black youth. D.C. already has the highest youth incarceration rate in the country, more than 3 times the national average. This bill would take those discrepancies and make them worse, funneling even more children to the adult system. Now, the bottom line is simple. The legislation in front of us does not make us safer, does not make D.C. safer. It makes D.C. less safe. It will deepen racial disparities, and it will push more kids into adult prisons when they're more likely to come off out worse than they were, not better. If we care about public safety, the last place we should be doing is putting 14-year-olds in adult prison. Instead of taking power away from D.C. residents and their elected officials, Congress should be focused on real national priorities like addressing gun violence that threatens communities, it threatens schools, it threatens our cities every single day. And finally, the rules in front of us have been created through incredible work of the community, through hearings, through meetings, through public testimony. Let's not all throw that out now. This bill is not about making D.C. safer. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I reserve my time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to clarify for the gentleman from Texas that these are not federal circuit judges. They have the same jurisdiction as state and local judges. That is what actually the bill presented says. These are local judges. They're not circuit judges. They're not federal judges. Let's be clear what this is about. This is about allowing Donald Trump to select local judges for D.C. and bypass a commission system that is currently in place where the president still has an ability to select from a panel of different judges. There is no state in the United States, in our country, that allows the president to directly select local judges. This is an outrageous attempt to take away power from 700,000 residents and to hurt our independent judiciary system here in the district. This bill is not about safety, it is not about the Constitution, it has nothing to do with federal circuit court judges. It's a power grab to elect for Donald Trump to self-select judges. And finally, as I close, I want to remind all of our friends that all these D.C. bills in front of us are about Donald Trump trying to play mayor of Washington, D.C. And if he wants to be mayor, he should resign from president and run for mayor himself. With that, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I strongly oppose this bill, which would eliminate the D.C. Judicial Nomination Commission and give a president, any president, the sole power to make nominations for D.C. local courts, which deal with municipal issues. Right now, under the Home Rule Act, the D.C. Judicial Nomination Commission submits a list of 3 candidates for each judicial vacancy. Of course, then it's considered by the president. This bill would wipe away the commission, and it would allow the president to directly appoint and have full control over the selection of these judges. This is an absurd level of federal control over what is local judges. Every state and territory in the United States selects its own judges. Only in D.C. do Republicans think that President Trump should decide who your local judges are. And let's also be honest about what the bill is really about. This has nothing to do with public safety. It's a power grab to take away power and authority from over 700,000 residents of this district. Now, let's be clear. D.C. does face a judicial vacancy crisis. There are currently 15 open seats across the D.C. Superior and Court of Appeals, 13 on the Superior Court side, 2 on the Court of Appeals. But why do the vacancies actually exist? The commission has submitted names for every single one of those open seats. So the bottleneck is not the commission, it's the slow pace of nominations by the president and confirmations by the Senate. The Senate could solve this tomorrow, and we know who controls the Senate, the Republicans. So let's be honest about what this bill is really about. It's not about the Constitution, it's about partisanship. The House majority wants to give Donald Trump the ability to select judges for local municipal matters for the Washington, D.C., and bypass the current commission process that exists. This is another attempt for Republicans to try to gut D.C.'s nonpartisan judiciary and replace it with partisan right-wing judges. The legislation does nothing to improve the judicial system. It strips away one of the few tools D.C. residents have to shape their courts, and it erodes judicial independence. The bill is unnecessary, it is undemocratic, and it really goes to the independence of our courts. I urge all of our colleagues to oppose it, and Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time. As a nation, first and foremost, we must acknowledge the human cost of this horrific tragedy. A wife has lost her husband, children have lost their father, a family has been shattered by senseless violence. And whatever our personal political views, there should be no hesitation in extending deep sympathy to Charlie Kirk's loved ones, family, and friends. We also stand here today to reaffirm a principle that runs deeper than politics. Political violence has no place in the United States of America. Our democracy rests on a fragile but enduring promise that disagreements are to be aired through speech, through debate, and through the ballot box, not through intimidation, not through violence, and not through bloodshed. That promise is enshrined in the Constitution, which protects freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Precisely because the framers understood, as we all know, that a democracy cannot function without the ability to argue, to disagree, and sometimes offend each other without fear of retribution. And that principle, of course, cuts both ways. We cannot claim to defend free speech if we only protect words we find comfortable or agreeable or polite. The test of our commitment to the First Amendment is not whether we defend the speech we like, it's whether we defend the speech we dislike. Our Constitution demands that we find a way to live together in freedom, even when our visions for the country might differ. Democracy requires that we resolve our differences not by force, but by persuasion, not by threats, but by votes, not by silencing votes, but by answering them. So today, we all join together to mourn the Kirk family. Let's recommit ourselves to the freedoms guaranteed in our Constitution. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from